Welcome. NSG 318. Study Section 2. An overview of research process. Introduction. In the previous study section, you learned about nursing research. Nurses have the responsibility to ensure that their clients are the recipients of care that reflects the most current and relevant knowledge available. Thus, research has become a highly valued activity for nurses. In today's world, nurses must become lifelong learners, capable of reflecting on, evaluating, and modifying their clinical practice based on new knowledge. Nurses are also increasingly expected to become producers of new knowledge through nursing research. In this study section, you will learn about the steps of the research process. Learning outcomes for study section 2. When you have studied this section, you should be able to 1. Define the term research. 2. Discuss the phase of research process. 3. Explain the steps in research process. Research process. Research is a process similar in some ways to the other processes. A process consists of a purpose, a series of actions, and a goal. Therefore, the background acquired early in problem solving and nursing process is also useful in research. The research process involves conceptualizing a research project, planning and implementing that project, and communicating the findings. Each step progressively builds on the previous steps. However, it is flexible. Characteristics features of research are systematic solving of scientific problems, using scientific methods, system of interconnecting phases and steps. Types of research. 1. Quantitative research. This is a formal, objective, systematic process in which numerical data are used to obtain information about the world. It seeks to quantify or reflect with numbers observations about human behavior. This type of research method is used to describe variables, examine relationships amongst variables, and determine cause and effect interactions between variables. It is currently the predominantly used method of scientific investigation in nursing. The types of quantitative research are descriptive research, correlational research, quasi-experimental research, and experimental research. 2. Qualitative research is a systematic, interactive, subjective approach used to describe life experiences and give them meaning. It emphasizes verbal descriptions and explanations of human behavior. Rather than concerning itself primarily with representativeness samples, qualitative research emphasizes carefully and detailed descriptions of life experiences such as pain, caring, and comfort. This method is very useful for investigating emotional responses. The types of qualitative research are phenomenological research, grounded theory research, ethnographic research, historical research, philosophical inquiry, critical social theory methodology. Phase of conception. The first phase of research process, this is the phase in which content and structure of research are created. Conceptualization refers to the process of developing, refining abstract ideas. The activities include thinking, rethinking, theorizing, making decisions, and reviewing ideas. It is composed of 4 steps: formulation and set bounds of research problem, determine the purpose of study, searching and review the literature related to the research problem, development of theoretical construction of the future research, creation of hypothesis. How the research problem is formulated. Formulation and set points of research problem determine the purpose of the study. Accidental observation of phenomena which we are not able to explain, curiosity. Formulation of questions. Why and how the phenomenon originated. A lot of uncertainties. Small amounts of certainties. Considerations on possible causes of the phenomenon. Discussion with co-workers. Study of literature. Personal experience of researcher. Formulation of first draft of research problem. Considerations whether the research problem is solvable. If yes, then what kind of method should be used? If no, it is necessary to go back and start to think of another way. Looking for information related to research problem in literature. The aim of this step is to find the older and current information related to the research problem. We would like to find the answers to the following questions. Did anybody formulate the same research problem as mine in the past? Did anybody solve the same or similar problem? Is the solving of the defined research problem fruitful or not? Development of the theoretical construction for solving the research problem. Main aims. Thinking on the content of future research. On its timing and structure. On the necessary conditions. Good factual model of future research will save time, money, and decreases probability of stress and mistakes during research. Necessary conditions. The research problem is clearly defined. The technical and personal conditions are available. The social, legal, and ethical views are known. The main aims are defined. Result of these steps. Clear framework for solving the research problem. Formulation of hypothesis. A well thought out and focused research questions leads directly into hypothesis. Creation of rational assumption on the possible causes of the observed phenomenon. Creation of the questions focused on the essence of the research problem. Characteristics of good hypothesis. Gives insights into research questions, is testable and measured by the proposed research, springs logically from the experience of the staff. The goal of science is to find an explanation for why the facts are as they are. Such an explanation is an hypothesis. A good hypothesis meets several standards. It should provide an adequate explanation of the observed facts. If two or more hypotheses meet this standard, the simpler one is preferred. It should be able to predict new facts. One of the most exciting events in science is to predict the results of an experiment not yet performed. If the hypothesis is valid, and then it should be able to predict new facts. One of the most exciting events in science is to predict the results of an experiment not yet performed, if the hypothesis is valid, and then to perform the experiment. The hypothesis that the experimental treatment had no effect is called the null hypothesis. Phase of elaboration of proposal and research plan. It is a general plan of research. Selection of patients, animals, other objects used for solving the problem. Creation of representative sample, inclusion, exclusion criteria. Selection of the methods, qualitative, quantitative. Creation of pilot study. Selection of methods. Selection of research technology. Development a protocol of research. To define the schedule of research. To define the control methods. To control if the research procedures are correct or not. To define the statistical methods used for evaluation of the obtained results. To define the financial, material, and personal needs to secure success in the research. Empiric phase. The aim of this phase is production of results, collection of data, and their preparation for next analysis. The results are produced by experiments on animals, by clinical study, by using questionnaire, interview, observation, by using models, biological, electronic, mathematics. Reproducibility of scientific work. The single feature that is most characteristic of science is reproducibility. If scientists cannot duplicate their first results, they are forced to conclude that they were invalid. This problem occurs often. Its cause is usually some unrecognized and hence uncontrolled factor in the experiments, e.g., unrecognized variation in the properties of different batches of the materials used in the experiments. With luck, the inability to reproduce experiments will be discovered by the same scientists who did the first experiments. This is why scientists generally repeat their experiments several times before reporting them in a scientific paper. Analytic phase. The content of this phase is quantitative analysis of the data, qualitative analysis of the data, statistical analysis of the data, interpretation of the results. Methods used in analytic phase. Correlation, looking for relationship among the two or more values. Comparison, comparison of the results obtained in one research with similar research done by other researchers. Disseminative phase. In this phase, when results of the research are published as research reports, lectures and posters at congresses and conferences, papers in journals. Notes: most nurses' researches, especially among students, end up on the bench without reaching this important phase. Steps in the research process. There are steps to undertake in the research process, and these are: identify the problem. The first step and one of the most important steps in the research process is to clearly identify the problem that will be studied. Generally, a broad topic area is selected, and then the topic is narrowed down to a specific one-sentence statement of the problem. This step of the research may be the most difficult of all and may take great ideal time. Martins, 1994, contended that a good problem statement helps the researcher to move through the steps of the process. Determine the purpose of the study. Justification, significance. Although the term purpose is often used interchangeably with problem, a distinction can be made between these two terms. The statement addresses what will be studied. The purpose furnishes why the study is being done. There must be a sound rationale or justification for every research project. Some studies are viewed as inconsequential and wasteful of time and money. The researcher must make explicit the expectation for the use of the study results. If the purpose of a study is clearly presented and justified, the researcher will be much more likely to receive approval for the study and also will be more likely to recruit participants for the study. Review the literature. Purposes of the literature review. To determine what is already known, the idea for a study may be formed while the researcher is in the library. If previous research is found, the researcher must decide whether to replicate or study or examine another aspect of the problem. The review of the literature is necessary to narrow the problem to be studied. It also helps to plan the study methodology. Research should build on previous knowledge. Before beginning a study, it is important to determine what knowledge exists of the study. There are few topics about which there is no existing knowledge base. There are many routes of access to the published literature. Literature sources can be located through the library card catalog, indices, abstracts, and computer-assisted searches. Use of the library. The wealth of information libraries contain can be overwhelming. Beware of serendipity. the unexpected or unplanned finding of information on one topic during the process of searching for information on another topic. Keep in mind your original focus. Prepare to spend a long time in the library. If you are not familiar with a particular library, consult the staff and tour the library. Develop a theoretical or conceptual framework. The goal of research is to develop scientific knowledge. Research and theory are intertwined. Research can test theories as well as help to develop and refine theories. Thus, theoretical frameworks are a valuable part of scientific research. The theoretical or conceptual frameworks will assist in the selection of the study variables and in defining them. The framework also will direct the hypothesis and the interpretation of the findings. Identify the study assumption. Assumptions are beliefs that are held to be true but have not necessarily been proven. Each scientific investment is based on assumption. These assumptions should be stated explicitly. Frequently, however, the assumptions are implicit. This means that the study was based on certain assumptions, but the researcher did not openly acknowledge or list these assumptions. Study assumptions influence the questions that are asked, the data that are gathered, the method used to gather the data, and the interpretation of the data. Acknowledge the limitations of study. The researcher should try to identify study limitations or weaknesses. Limitations are uncontrolled variables that may affect study results and limit the generalizability of the findings. In nearly every nursing study, there are variables over which the researcher either has no control or chooses not to exercise control. These variables are called extraneous variables. For example, the educational level of subjects would be a study limitation if the researcher could not control this variable and thought that it might influence the study results. In experimental studies, uncontrolled variables are referred to as threats to internal and external validity. Formulate the hypothesis or research question. A researcher's expectation about the study is expressed in a hypothesis. A hypothesis predicts the relationship between two or more variables, whereas the problem statement asks a question. The hypothesis contains the population and variables, just as the problem statement does. In addition, the hypothesis proposes the relationship between the independent and the dependent variable. In experimental studies, the independent variable is the cause or the variable that is thought to influence the dependent variable. The dependent variable is the effect or the variable that is influenced by the researcher's manipulation, control of the independent variable. A hypothesis must be tested or verified empirically, which means that it must be capable of being tested in the real world by observations gathered through the senses. Define study variable or terms. The variable and terms contained in the study hypothesis or research questions need to be defined so that their meaning is clear to the researcher and the reader of the research report. The definitions are usually dictionary or theoretical definitions. A variable should be operationally defined. An operational definition indicates how a variable will be observed or measured. Operational definitions frequently include the instruments that will be used or measure the variable. If anxiety were being measured, the theoretical definition would then be indicated by the identification of the tool or behavior that will be used to measure anxiety. Select the research design. The research design is the plan for how the study will be collected and the means used to obtain this data. For example, the researcher must decide if the study will examine cause and effect relationship or will only describe existing situations. The research chooses the design that is most appropriate to test the hypothesis or answer the research questions. Identify the population. The population is a complete set of individuals or objects that possesses some common characteristics of interest to the researcher. The research must specify the broad population or group of interest as well as the actual population that is available for the study. The first type of population is identified as the target population, and the second type is called the accessible population. The target population, also called the universe, is made up of a study. The accessible population is that group that is actually available for study by the researcher. The time population does not always mean that available for study. A nurse researcher might study a population of charts or a population of blood pressure reading. A nurse researcher might study a population of charts or population of blood pressure reading. Select the sample. Although researchers are always interested in population, usually a subgroup of the population called a sample is studied. The sample is chosen to represent the population and is used to make generalization about the population. Obtaining data from an entire population is time-consuming, and it may even be impossible at times to contact or locate every member of a population. If the sample is carefully selected, the researcher can make claim about the population with a certain degree of confidence. The method of selecting the sample will determine how representative the sample is of the population. Elements of informed consent. The principal means for ensuring that the rights of research subjects are protected is through informed consent. Informed consent concerns the subject's participation in research in which they have of study before the study begins. The major elements of informed consent are: researchers are identified and credentials presented. Subject selection process is described. Purpose of study is described. Study procedures are discussed. Potential risks are described. Potential benefits are described. Compensation, if any, are discussed. Alternative procedures, if any, are disclosed. Anonymity or confidentiality is assured. Rights to refuse to participate or to withdraw from the study without penalty is assured. Offer to answer all questions is made. Means of obtaining study results is presented. Conduct a pilot study. It is advisable to conduct a study before the study participants are approached and the actual study is carried out. A pilot study involves a miniature trial version of the planned study. People are selected for the pilot study that is similar to the sample that will be used for the actual study. There are several reasons for conducting a pilot study. The researcher can determine the feasibility of the study, test the instruments that will be used, gain experience with methodology and instruments, identify problems in data collection. A pilot study can be used to test new instruments or to evaluate an existing instrument that has been altered. The researcher may think that the questionnaire is so simple that a 10-year-old could fill it out, but find out in a pilot study that 30-year-old have great difficulty in understanding several of the questions. Collect the data. Data are the pieces of information or facts that are collected in scientific investigation. Although the data collection step of the research process may be very time-consuming, it is sometimes considered to be the most exciting part of research. Organize the data for analysis. After the data are collected, it is necessary to organize the data for tabulation and evaluation. This task can be overwhelming at times. Actually, this step of the research process should have been planned long before the data were collected. The researcher should have prepared dummy tables and graphs that could then be fed in with the data once they are obtained. Analyze the data. This stage of research process, analyzing the data, may make some of you cringe, for you can quickly ascertain that the statistics may be involved. In this day of computer, data analysis has been greatly simplified. Interpret the findings. After the data analysis, the findings should be interpreted in light of the study hypothesis or research questions. If a hypothesis was tested, a determination is made as to whether the data supports the research hypothesis or not. Also, the framework for the study is discussed in light of findings. If the data supports the research hypothesis, then the theoretical or conceptual framework is also supported. Conversely, if the research questions hypothesis is not supported, the framework of the study is also not supported. The researcher should discuss why any problem incurred in the course of the study or any limitation of the design study that may have influenced the study. Communicate the findings. Final step in the research process and the most important one for nursing is the communication of the study findings. No matter how significant the findings may be, they are of little value to the nursing profession if the research fails to disseminate this result to other colleagues. Reporting research results contributes to the base of evidence for nursing practice and is a professional responsibility. Research results can be presented in various venues and of types of publication to audience of nurses, healthcare professionals, policymakers, and healthcare consumers. These include student-related outlets, term papers, theses, and dissertation, and professional ones, journal articles, books, reports to funders, conference presentations. Researchers who want to communicate their findings to other researchers or clinicians can opt to present findings orally in writing. By presenting and publishing their findings, researchers are able to advance the knowledge of a discipline and receive personal recognition, professional advancement, and other psychological and financial compensation. Communicating research findings also promote the critique and replication of studies, identification of additional research problems, and the use of findings in practice. Sources of nursing research problems. The sources of generating appropriate nursing research problems are numerous, some of which include personal experiences, clinical sources, literature sources, existing theories, previous research. In summary, in this study section, you have learned that the research process involves conceptualizing a research project, planning and implementing that project, and communicating the findings. Quantitative research. This is a formal, objective, systematic process in which numerical data are used to obtain information about the world. Qualitative research. This is a systematic, interactive, subjective approach used to describe life experiences and give them meaning. The 5 phases of research process are as follows: phase of conception, phase of elaboration of research plan, empiric phase, analytic phase, and disseminative phase. With this, we've come to the end of study section 2.